尊敬的各位领导、各位来宾，开幕式即将开始。为确保会议顺利进行，请将手机关机或调成静音状态。谢谢。
Ladies and gentlemen, we are about to start the opening ceremony shortly. To ensure the meeting runs smoothly, please turn off your mobile phones or set them on silent mode. Thank you very much for your cooperation.
尊敬的各位领导、各位来宾、女士们、先生们，大家上午好！欢迎来到
Good morning.
欢迎来到百年大党国际学术研讨会开幕式。
Welcome to the International Symposium on the Communist Party of China's history of 100 years.
下面有请主礼嘉宾入场。
Now, may I invite our officiating guests.
欢迎各位，请就座，谢谢。
Please be seated.
各位，让我们以热烈掌声对嘉宾们的到来表示欢迎。
Ladies and gentlemen, please join me to extend a very warm welcome to our guests.
欢迎各位。首先要进行亮灯仪式，有请以下主礼嘉宾移步到舞台上。
First of all, may we please invite our guests onto the stage to commence the lighting ceremony.
有请香港特区行政长官林郑月娥女士。
Mrs. Carrie Lam, Chief Executive, Hong Kong SAR.
中央政府驻港联络办副主任谭铁牛先生。
Mr. Tan Tianniu, Deputy Director, Liaison Office of the Central People's Government in Hong Kong.
外交部驻港公署特派员刘光源先生。
Mr. Liu Guangyuan, Commissioner, Office of the Commissioner of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of People's Republic of China in Hong Kong.
中国人民解放军驻香港部队政委蔡永忠先生。
Mr. Cai Yongzhong, Political Commissar, the People's Liberation Army, Hong Kong Garrison.
紫荆文化集团董事长毛超峰先生。
Mr. Mao Chaofeng, Chairman, Bohemia Culture Group Company Limited.
香港中资银行业协会会长孙玉先生。
Mr. Sun Yu, Chairman, Chinese Banking Association of Hong Kong.
招商局集团董事王崔军先生。
Mr. Wang Cuijun, Director, China Merchants Group Limited.
中国光大集团有限公司班子成员陈林龙先生。
Mr. Chen Linlong, Member of the Executive Committee of China Everbright Holdings Company Limited.
好，麻烦各位主礼嘉宾先看向前方，我们合影留念。
It's time to take a very nice photo.
好，谢谢各位。
谢谢。那么下面就进入我们的亮灯仪式，有请主礼嘉宾一同为百年大党国际学术研讨会亮灯。请主礼嘉宾将右手放在横杆的上面。等一下，我们将用口号3、2、1一起倒数来推动你们面前的这个推杆。准备好了吗？我们一起来吧。3、2、1，推！
谢谢各位，让我们再次望向前方的摄影师合影，留下这难忘的瞬间。
This is a perfect photo opportunity for our photographers. Thank you very much.
好，谢谢各位主礼嘉宾，请移步就座，谢谢。
Thank you. Please be seated.
中国共产党的百年历史是一部团结带领中国人民为美好生活共同奋斗的历史。下面我们将会播放一部由新华社和紫荆杂志社共同拍摄的短片。这部短片将会简要地讲述中国共产党的百年峥嵘岁月，同时也会展现世界各国政党高层如何评价中国共产党的历史成就。
This year is the 100th anniversary of the Communist Party of China. A history of 100 years has witnessed the Communist Party of China uniting the Chinese people and leading them to strive for a better life. And now we will play a short video co-produced by Xinhua News Agency and Bohemian Magazine. Let's briefly review the journey of the Communist Party of China and see how other senior political members, party members of other countries to view the history and achievements of the party.
好，让我们请看大屏幕。
2021 marks the centenary of the founding of the Communist Party of China, or CPC. From 1921 to 2021, the party has seen its members increase from just over 50 to over 90 million, making it the biggest political party in the world. The 100-year history of the CPC is a history about the party uniting and leading people's striving for a better life.
عمر الحزب الشيوعي الصيني قرن كامل. في هذا القرن تعرض الحزب لمشاكل وهجمات وأوضاع غاية في القسوة والعنف، ومع هذا تجاوزها واستطاع أن يرتبط بشعبه وأن يحقق ما لم يحققه حزب آخر في التاريخ.
Because they have created a system that tells them what the majority of the people want. And therefore CPC represents the sum total for the aspiration of the Chinese people.
One of the secrets, I think, is the reform agenda that CPC has come up with over the last 50 years. I think that issue of framing the problem and creating an understanding and common vision on the problem and pooling all the resources and capabilities in such a way that these problems can be solved is one of the secrets behind this achievement. The second secret I see is the great attention that the Chinese government and the CPC have given for science, technology, and innovation. The third secret I see is Chinese determination to open itself up to the world. So the opening up strategy has benefited not only the Chinese people, but also the global economy.
According to a Harvard University survey released in July 2020, support rate of the CPC among the Chinese people reached over 90%. Self-discipline and self-reform have been the gene of the CPC since its founding a century ago.
The Communist Party of China is a very rare example that the party has kept a very strong and strict code of conduct and does not let any incompetent to rise up and lead from the front. Seeing all these things, the people of China believe in the leadership of the CPC, and the belief of the people then encourages the party to do more.
You have to give credit to the Communist Party of China for having managed to steer the country in a disciplined manner, in a focused manner, that has enabled them to achieve what one can genuinely call the Chinese miracle.
When the COVID-19 epidemic was intertwined with profound changes unseen in a century, the Communist Party of China has always put the people first in the fight against the epidemic and poverty.
Porque ha sido el pueblo chino el que, bajo la dirección del Partido Comunista de China, ha hecho el gran esfuerzo que le ha permitido tener una gran potencia económica en estos momentos. El Partido Comunista de China se ha mostrado dinámico en estos 100 años porque siempre ha estado ligado al pueblo. Siempre ha sido el partido del pueblo.
Успех китайского чуда в борьбе с нищетой, в борьбе с бедностью, он является, как я уже до этого говорил, примером для всего мира, всего человечества, потому что они показали, что есть такая возможность построить именно справедливое общество, что позволяет государству использовать тот капитал, накопленный за счет именно такого руководства, да, в социальных нуждах.
Under the CPC leadership over the course of several decades, the once impoverished country has emerged as the world's second largest economy and built a well-off society with the world's largest middle-income population.
That stands out in the whole history of the CPC. It's a party that was emerged from the people, was created by the people, and has always sought to stay close to the people.
赢得人民信任，得到人民支持，党就能克服任何困难，就能够无往而不胜。
下面由中央政府驻港联络办和紫荆文化集团联合主办的百年大党国际学术研讨会开幕式正式开始。
Now, the opening ceremony of the International Symposium on the Communist Party of China's history of 100 years officially starts, co-hosted by the Liaison Office of the Central Government in Hong Kong and Bohemia Culture Holdings Limited.
首先，有请本次活动主办机构紫荆文化集团董事长毛超峰先生致欢迎词。
First of all, let's invite Mr. Mao Chaofeng, Chairman of Bohemia Culture Holdings Limited, the host of today's event, to deliver a speech.
有请。
尊敬的林郑月娥行政长官、谭铁牛副主任、刘光源特派员、蔡永忠政委、各位嘉宾、女士们、先生们、朋友们，大家上午好。今天，来自世界各地的专家学者和香港各界人士欢聚在一起，在美丽的东方之珠举办国际学术研讨会，回顾中国共产党的100年历程，探讨中国共产党治国理政的理念和实践。在此，请允许我代表主办方，向与会的专家学者、嘉宾和朋友们表示热烈的欢迎和衷心的感谢。100年前，中国共产党成立这一开天辟地的大事件，深刻改变了近代以来中华民族发展的方向和进程，深刻改变了中国人民和中华民族的前途。我们举办此次，就是旨在探讨中国共产党在一个拥有14亿多人口的大国治国理政的成功经验。中国共产党是为中国人民谋幸福、为中华民族谋复兴的政党，也是致力于人类的进步事业的政党。中国共产党的成功，不仅对中国人民、中华民族具有重大的意义，而且具有世界意义。中国共产党的国家治理经验，为发展中国家治理提供了中国智慧。中国 走和平发展的道路，为维护世界和平提供了中国力量。中国推动构建人类命运共同体，为全球治理提供了中国方案。正如英国的著名学者马丁·雅克先生曾经指出的，中国提供了一种新的可能，开辟了一条合作共赢、共建共享的文明发展新道路。这是前无古人的伟大创举，也是改变世界的伟大创造。我们举办此次研讨会，就是旨在展望在中国共产党领导下，香港一国两制的美好前景。中国共产党是一国两制方针的创立者、领导者、践行者和维护者。一国两制在香港已经探索和实践多年，期间无论是顺利还是波折，中国共产党都始终维护香港的繁荣发展和稳定，致力于推动一国两制行稳致远。正如英国前首相撒切尔夫人的外交政策顾问查尔斯·鲍威尔所言，一国两制以一种优雅的方式解决了难题，也是一种长期的解决方案。这既是中国的创举，也是香港之幸。展望未来，我们可以自信地说，香港的明天一定会更美好。女士们、先生们、朋友们，我们的会议一经发出邀请，迅速得到了国际学界的积极响应。来自美国、英国、法国、俄罗斯、德国、日本、澳大利亚、马来西亚以及中国香港等不同国家和地区的国际知名专家学者纷纷应邀参加。研讨主题涉及政治、经济、法律、文化等多个领域，对中国共产党的100年历程进行多视角的分析和解读。希望今天与会的专家学者在研讨会的演讲和圆桌论坛上的发言能够畅所欲言，各抒己见，坦诚交流。我相信各位专家学者的独到见解，可以让越来越多的朋友对中国共产党有更多、更深、更加清晰的认识与理解，进而让更多的人了解一个真实、立体、全面的中国。女士们、先生们、朋友们，中国共产党已经走过了100年历程，正展现出蓬勃生机和活力。中国共产党在中国执政实践的成功，为构建人类命运共同体做出了贡献。相信一个开放、自信的100年大党，将带领中国人民为人类进步事业做出新的更大贡献。最后，祝百年大党国际学术研讨会圆满成功。谢谢大家。
谢谢毛朝凤先生，请就座，谢谢。
Thank you, Mr. 毛朝凤。
下面有请香港特区行政长官林郑月娥女士致辞。
Now please invite Mrs. Carrie Lam, Chief Executive of the Hong Kong SAR, to deliver a speech. Welcome.
Mr. Mao, Deputy Director Tan, Commissioner Liu, Major General Tsai, distinguished speakers and guests, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. It is a great pleasure to join you for today's seminar. My thanks to Bohemia Magazine for organizing this event, putting timely spotlight on the Communist Party of China, which will shortly celebrate the 100th anniversary of its founding. I particularly welcome this English-speaking event as the ideology and success of this largest governing party in the world should be told globally, clear and loud. The Communist Party of China took root with its first National Congress in Shanghai in 1921 The 13 delegates in attendance on that historic day represented less than 60 members. Today, the Communist Party of China is the longest ruling party in history and the largest ruling party in the world, counting a membership of over 90 million people. The party's longevity is a clear reflection of its unprecedented success, its boundless ability to reach out and respond to the needs and the ambitions of the people of China. I'm not about to cover the historic and continuing achievements and singular advantages of the party in 10 minutes, or indeed in 10 days. This welcome seminar and the expert speakers gathered around the world today will certainly make a start on that. But let me touch on just a few highlights to capture something of the weight, the worth, the remarkable scope and significance of the party to our nation. Let's first look at the economic performance, for it very much reflects a country's level of development and, more importantly, the living standard of its people. After overcoming an initial difficult period, China has made unparalleled economic progress, especially over the past 40 or so years since its reform and opening up in 1978. Over the past 40 years, China averaged annual GDP growth of over 9% at constant prices. Over the same period, the world economy grew less than 3%. China today is already the preeminent engine driving the global economy. Last year, China's GDP grew 2.3%, the only major economy to realize positive growth in the year of the pandemic. It is expected that China will contribute more than 1/3 of global economic growth in 2021. China's economy surged past Germany's in 2007 and Japan's 3 years later, taking its proud place as the world's second-largest economy. At the same time, China is now the largest industrial manufacturer, largest goods trader, and largest foreign exchange reserve holder. Chinese people's livelihood has improved significantly. Its gross domestic product per capita rose from merely about $200 in 1978 to over $10,000 today. Even more remarkably, over the past 4 decades, China has lifted 850 million people out of poverty. At the end of 2020, it eliminated extreme poverty altogether. That, ladies and gentlemen, is a signal achievement for a nation that today counts 20% of the world's population. More than a Chinese milestone, its eradication actually serves as a landmark in human history. It demonstrates that our country and the Communist Party of China, as its ruling party, always puts its people first. This people-first principle has also been clearly demonstrated in our country's fight against COVID-19. As pointed out by General Secretary and President Xi Jinping, and I quote, "We must put people and their lives first. The battle with COVID-19 is won for the people and by the people. What has happened proves that to completely defeat the virus, we must put people's lives and health front and center, demonstrate a great sense of political responsibility and courage, and make extraordinary responses to an extraordinary challenge. No doubt, no effort must be spared to attend every case, save every patient, and truly respect the value and dignity of every human life," unquote. President Xi is true to his word. Like all countries in the world, China has been hard hit by COVID-19, with the virus costing thousands of lives, challenging the health system, and calling a halt to social and economic activities. In the face of this unprecedented challenge, the Communist Party of China has shown great leadership and determination and taken resolute actions to combat the pandemic. The results are there for all to see. The number of infections has been minimized, and China is the first major economy in the world to put the pandemic under control and allow normality to very much resume. Our country's actions are not only for the benefits of its own people, but also for the world. The stringent actions taken by China at an early stage of the pandemic have brought valuable time for the world to make preparations. China has also mounted a massive global humanitarian operation during the pandemic, providing free vaccines and medical supplies to developing countries in need. Our nation's response to COVID-19, as well as its many achievements over the many decades, speak of the unique advantages enjoyed by the country under the ruling of the CPC. Such unique advantages include extraordinary capability in organizing and mobilization, in planning and coordination, as well as in implementation. Under the leadership of the CPC, China managed to make quick decisions and mobilize all forces in a fight against the pandemic. Medical teams and equipment from different provinces were swiftly gathered to provide support to places suffering from outbreaks. People from all walks of life proactively joined the fight and made their contributions. Medical staff in public hospitals worked days and nights to care for the patients, while grassroots organizations and personnel provided support to tens of thousands of people during lockdowns. Perhaps the most impressive of all, large-scale temporary hospitals were put up within days to care for the patients. During the outbreak in Wuhan, the Huochengshan Hospital and the Leishanshan Hospital were put up in 10 and 12 days, respectively. The unique advantages of China are also clear in infrastructure construction. China's first high-speed railway, the Beijing-Tianjin line, opened in 2008. By the end of 2020, China's high-speed railway tracks already stretched for 38,000 kilometers, doubling the figure in just 5 years' time. No other nation in the world can claim a domestic railway of such size of significance. This is what people called the speed of China, made possible under the leadership of the Communist Party of China. As an inseparable part of the People's Republic of China, Hong Kong's Special Administrative Region has benefited hugely from the country. The country provides a safe haven for Hong Kong in times of turmoil and giving us a shot in the arm when needed. For example, it has rendered support for Hong Kong to ride out and overcome the serious threats to our financial stability posed by the 1997 Asian financial crisis. The life and health risks and economic recession caused by the 2003 SARS outbreak, the negative impact of the 2008 global financial tsunami, and more recently, the COVID-19 pandemic. In addition, the country always embraces Hong Kong in its overall development, as evident by the important roles given to Hong Kong in major national strategies, such as the Belt and Road Initiative, the Guangdong, Hong Kong, Macau Greater Bay Area, as well as in the recently approved 14th Five-Year Plan of the nation. But the most important of all, the central government and the Communist Party of China have always been committed to the thorough implementation of this great concept of one country, two systems. Put forth by Mr. Deng Xiaoping, the great concept not only successfully resolved the issues left over by history, making it possible for Hong Kong to return to the embrace of our motherland, but also ensured the prosperity and stability of Hong Kong. Over the past 2 years, when Hong Kong faced unprecedented challenges, the central government and the Communist Party of China have stayed true to the original intention of one country, two systems, and always acted in accordance with the Constitution and the Basic Law. The implementation of the national security law since June 30th last year has effectively restored stability in the Hong Kong society, while the recent improvements to the electoral system of the Hong Kong Special Administrative Region will ensure patriots administering Hong Kong. These two key initiatives fully demonstrate the central government's and the Communist Party's unwavering determination in upholding one country, two systems, and they will go a long way towards ensuring the long-term prosperity and stability of Hong Kong. Ladies and gentlemen, history has told us that the Communist Party of China has been able to lead the country to overcome difficulties and challenges, bring prosperity to the country, and improve people's livelihood. As our country continues to make strides towards the Chinese dream of national rejuvenation, there will be more challenges in the future, but they too will be overwhelmingly met, managed, and surmounted by the Communist Party of China and the people of China. Now that Hong Kong has been put back on its right track under the party's declared institutional strength of one country, two systems, we should make our contribution to the Chinese dream by embracing patriotism, national pride, team spirit, and hard work, and putting people's interest first. I wish this seminar every success. Thank you very much.
谢谢行政长官，请就座，谢谢。
Thank you very much, Chief Executive Carrie Lam.
下面有请中央政府驻港联络办副主任谭铁牛先生致辞。
Now let's invite Mr. Tan Tianniu, Deputy Director of the Liaison Office of the Central Government in Hong Kong, to deliver a speech. Welcome.
Dear friends, colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. In the run-up to the 100th anniversary of the founding of the Communist Party of China, or CPC, it is truly my great pleasure to join you here at today's international symposium to explore the party's 100 years history and its reasons for success. On behalf of the Liaison Office of the Central People's Government in Hong Kong, I would like to extend a warm congratulations on opening of the symposium and also a very warm welcome to all of you. 100 years ago, the party was founded at a time of colossal internal turmoil, external stress, and unprecedented social crisis. Over the past 100 years, the CPC has succeeded in uniting and leading the Chinese people in an arduous and relentless struggle, resulting in a tremendous transformation of China. China now is the world's second largest economy. It has seen remarkable technological advancement, a surge of comprehensive national power, and a rising international influence. Many may wonder, why has the CPC been able to achieve such great successes? How is it that it enjoys such popular support from the Chinese people? What makes the CPC work in China? The answer, I think, can be found in the centennial history of the party. The CPC is persistent in pursuing lofty ideals. General Secretary Xi Jinping has stressed many times that the original aspiration and mission of the Chinese communists is to seek happiness for the Chinese people and rejuvenation for the Chinese nation. This has been the fundamental driving force that has inspired the Chinese communists to strive forward. Over the past 100 years, the Chinese nation, under the leadership of the CPC, has made steady progress towards prosperity and strength. Once impoverished and weak, the Chinese nation has emerged from obscurity to take its position on the spotlight on the world stage. Faced with profound changes posed by unilateralism, protectionism, and hegemonism, the CPC has put forward the vision of building a community of shared future for mankind, promoted international cooperation via the Belt and Road Initiative, and endeavored to foster a new type of international relations based on mutual respect, fairness, justice, and win-win cooperation. To contain the raging COVID-19 pandemic, China has taken the lead in pledging to make vaccines a global public good and has provided assistance to more than 80 countries and international organizations. History bears witness to the fact that by adhering to its lofty ideas and waging relentless struggles, the CPC has successfully led the Chinese people in pulling off the twin miracles, that is, rapid economic development and lasting social stability, contributing at the same time China's wisdom and perspective towards resolving the problems facing mankind. The CPC is persistent in seeking truth from facts. General Secretary Xi Jinping observed that all our past achievements were based on seeking truth from facts. The centennial history of the CPC is one of leading the people to understand, transform, build, and develop China in a down-to-earth manner. During the course of its history, the CPC has been faced with a raft of theoretical and practical questions, such as what is socialism and how to build it, what kind of party to build and how to build it, what kind of achievement to achieve and how to achieve it. To find answers to all these important questions, the CPC has always adapted the basic principles of Marxism to fit China's reality, rejected ideological and theoretical stasis, and kept moving ahead in sync with times. According to popular wisdom, only the wearer can tell where and whether the shoe pinches. Similarly, the CPC is committed to a development path that suits China's national conditions, refusing to be confined to the beaten tracks or simply to copy from others. History and practice have proved that a development path works best only when it accords with the grounded reality. The CPC is persistent in its people-oriented philosophy. General Secretary Xi Jinping has stressed that the people's aspiration for a better life is our striving goal. The CPC comes from the people, has its roots in the people, and make it a fundamental purpose to wholeheartedly serve the people. Over the past 100 years, the CPC has led the Chinese people in striving for national independence and rejuvenation, a cause that was being pursued for the people and by the people. Since its reform and opening up, 770 million rural residents in China have been lifted out of poverty. According to World Bank's International Poverty Standard, China has accounted for more than 70% of global poverty reduction during the same period of time. One who wholeheartedly serves the people is surely to be loved by the people. A role released last July, which was mentioned also by the video you saw early on, by Harvard University Kennedy School of Government, found that Chinese people's satisfaction with the central government and also the CPC reached 93%. This is the Chinese people's loftiest tribute to the CPC. Thanks to the party's people-centered philosophy, the party has been able to master the widest support from the people to achieve the most extraordinary success and wins the hearts and minds of the Chinese people. The CPC is persistent in carrying out self-reforms. General Secretary Xi Jinping has pointed out many times that the greatness of the CPC lies not in that it never makes mistakes, but that it never conceals its shortcomings, has the courage to face up to problems, to carry out self-reforms, and has a strong ability to correct itself. Throughout its centennial history, the CPC has always adhered to its fine tradition of courage and courageous self-reflection, and has kept purifying, perfecting, reforming, and improving itself. Since its 18th National Congress, the CPC Central Committee has stepped up its effort to comprehensively govern the party with even strict disciplines. Having the courage and the finesse to carry out self-reform is the fundamental reason why the CPC, as a major party with 100 years history and more than 90 million members, has been able to maintain its relevance and purity. Ladies and gentlemen, friends, over the past 100 years, Hong Kong has been closely intertwined with the CPC. In the early years of the People's Republic, the CPC made the decision to temporarily withhold the recovery of Hong Kong and maintain the status quo. After the third plenary session of the 11th CPC Central Committee, which was held in 1978, Deng Xiaoping, together with his colleagues, creatively put forward the great concept of one country, two systems. Since its return, Hong Kong has been embarked on a journey of unity and common development with the motherland. Faced with multiple challenges, which were mentioned by Chief Executive Carrie Lam earlier, the Central Committee, led by General Secretary Xi Jinping, has properly assessed up the situation and responded calmly by enacting the law of the People's Republic of China on safeguarding national security in Hong Kong SAR, improving the SAR's electoral systems, and maintains SAR's constitutional order. It also supports Hong Kong's participation in the development of the Guangdong, Hong Kong, Macau, the Great Bay Area, and also Hong Kong's integration in the national economy so as to maintain Hong Kong's long-term stability and prosperity. Hong Kong's future is bound to be even brighter. In the past 100 years, the CPC has actively reached out to people and cultures beyond its own shores. Following the fundamental principles of independence, equality, mutual respect, and non-interference in each other's internal affairs, the CPC has established links with over 400 political parties and international organizations in more than 140 countries and regions, transcending differences in ideology and social systems. It also has made its due contributions to maintaining world peace, promoting economic development, and driving human progress. Ladies and gentlemen, dear friends, recently a music video entitled "The Youth" has become very popular on the internet. It says, I quote, "I'm still the lad I used to be. My original aspiration has remained unchanged. 100 years is merely a test. The goals for a better life will be achieved one after another." Bearing its lofty goals in mind, the centennial CPC is in its prime. We firmly believe that as long as we stay true to our original aspiration, keep our mission firmly in mind, and forge ahead, the Chinese dream of the great rejuvenation of the Chinese nation will most certainly become true. An open and confident CPC will definitely be able to contribute to a better world in united efforts with nations across the world. Finally, I do wish today's symposium a great success, and you all enjoy the event. Thank you very much.
Thank you. 谢谢谭铁牛副主任，请就座，谢谢。
Thank you very much, Mr. Tan Tianniu.
下面有请外交部驻港公署特派员刘光源先生致辞。
Now let's invite Mr. Liu Guangyuan, Commissioner of the Office of the Foreign Ministry in Hong Kong, to deliver a speech. Welcome.
The Honorable Chief Executive Carrie Lam, Deputy Director Tan Tianliu, Chairman Mao Chaofeng, Major General Cai Yongzhong, distinguished guests, dear friends, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. It's a great pleasure to attend the International Symposium on the Communist Party of China's history of 100 years. As the CPC celebrates its first centenary, it is highly important that we review the remarkable journey our party has taken, draw inspiration and strength from history, and look into the future. China's diplomacy is conducted under the CPC leadership for the benefit of our people. It has been fully involved in the tremendous transformation as the Chinese nation stood up, grew prosperous, and is becoming strong. The diplomatic work since the inception of the party has demonstrated several salient features. It has stayed committed to keeping abreast with the times. The CPC led the Chinese people to achieve the national independence and liberation amid the flames of war, started a brand new chapter in China's history, and contributed significantly to the victory of the World Anti-Fascist War. From establishing an independent foreign policy of peace after the founding of the People's Republic of China, to actively integrating into the world economy since reform and opening up, and to making fresh contribution to human progress through major country diplomacy with Chinese characteristics in the new era. China's diplomacy under the party's leadership has all along followed the trend of times and kept breaking new ground in both theory and practice, showing its vision, initiative, and consistency. It has stayed committed to putting people first. The mission of the CPC is to seek happiness for the Chinese people and rejuvenation for the Chinese nation. Accordingly, China's diplomacy is all about serving the people wholeheartedly and realizing, safeguarding, and developing the fundamental interests of the greatest majority of the Chinese people. In the face of COVID-19, a once-in-a-century pandemic, we have delivered health kits to Chinese overseas, launched Spring Sprout vaccine program, and prudently evacuated Chinese nationals, including Hong Kong compatriots, from hard-hit areas. All this speaks volumes about the people-centered principle of China's diplomacy. It has stayed committed to pursuing the common good for the world. The CPC is devoted not only to serving the well-being of the Chinese people, but also striving for the human progress. Since the People's Republic of China resumed its lawful seat in the United Nations 50 years ago, it has acted as an adamant champion of fairness, justice, equality of countries large and small. Over the past 7 decades and more, China has provided aid to 166 countries and international organizations. It is also the second largest contributor to UN peacekeeping budget and the largest troop contributing country among the permanent members of the UN Security Council. The past century fully proves that the party's leadership is the biggest political advantage of China's diplomacy and a fundamental safeguard for the continued victory in China's diplomatic endeavors. Amid profound changes never seen in a century, China has embarked on a new journey of fully building a modern socialist country. Guided by Xi Jinping's thought on diplomacy, our major country diplomacy with Chinese characteristics in the new era will pursue the following goals. Focus on the country's top priorities and take into account both domestic needs and the international context. We will work all out for national development and rejuvenation on the diplomatic front. Facilitate the domestic and international circulations and contribute to the new development paradigm. We will scale up openness and cooperation and fully oppose protectionism of whatever form. We will advance high-quality Belt and Road cooperation, build an open world economy together with other countries, share more development opportunities with the world, and make great contributions to global recovery and growth. Expand global partnerships and continue to promote a new type of international relations. We will remain committed to pursuing peace, development, and win-win cooperation, foster all-round and balanced relations with major countries, deepen friendship with neighboring countries, enhance solidarity and cooperation with developing countries, and actively advocate a new type of international relations featuring mutual respect, fairness, justice, and win-win cooperation. We will further increase friendly exchanges with people around the globe and boost mutual understanding between China and the rest of the world. Protect our Mother Earth and forge a community with a shared future for humankind. The COVID-19 pandemic has again proven that isolation gets one nowhere, and only by pulling together can we build our common home. We will strengthen the international cooperation against COVID-19, work for a global community of health for all, and build an open, inclusive, clean, and beautiful world of lasting peace, universal security, and shared prosperity. We embrace true multilateralism, fully uphold the UN-centered international system, and will continue to advance the reform of the global governance. Dear friends, the world today is not tranquil. Some anti-China forces have tried to attack and smear China, and have even imposed unilateral sanctions and long-term jurisdiction, and flagrantly meddled with China's internal affairs in breach of international law and basic norms governing the international relations. We have every right to take countermeasures against such hegemonic acts. the law of the People's Republic of China on countering foreign sanctions, adopted by the Standing Committee of the National People's Congress 6 days ago, is exactly out of the pressing need to fight back against hegemonism and power politics, and safeguard national sovereignty, security, and development interests, and to coordinate domestic and foreign-related rule of law. Here is our solemn message to the small handful of anti-China forces. The dignity, the legitimate rights of the Chinese people are not to be undermined. The historical trend towards the great rejuvenation of the Chinese nation and the CPC leadership is not to be stopped. Any attempt, open or underhand, to interfere in China's internal affairs or curb China's development is doomed to fail. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, dear friends, with the implementation of the National Security Law for Hong Kong SAR and the improvement of the Hong Kong SAR's electoral system, Hong Kong has gone through a major transformation from chaos to stability, and one country, two systems has entered another stage of enduring success. At the new historical juncture, the Commissioner's Office will draw wisdom and strength from CPC history of the past century, carry forward our party's spirit and tradition, and stay true to our founding mission as we forge ahead. We will more vigorously oppose external interference, serve Hong Kong SAR's development, and put people at the center, and join hands with Hong Kong community to take diplomatic work relating to Hong Kong to new heights. I wish this symposium a great success. Thank you.
谢谢刘光源先生，请就座，谢谢。
Thank you very much, Mr. Liu.
开幕式环节到此结束。行政长官因为有公务在身，需要先行离席。让我们再一次对各位主礼嘉宾的出席表示感谢。
The opening ceremony comes to the end, and once again we thank our Chief Executive Carrie Lam and other guests for attending this event.
下面进入主旨发言环节，在主旨发言环节当中，来自美国、英国、马来西亚等国家的学者将会和大家一起分享他们眼中的中国共产党。
Okay, now let's move to keynote session. In this session, we'll have experts and scholars from the US, the UK, Malaysia, and other countries, as well as Hong Kong, and they will share with us their perception on the Communist Party of China.
首先有请马来西亚大马新闻资讯学院院长、香港中文大学政治及行政学系前系主任郑赤岩先生发言。
First, may we please invite Mr. Chang Chi-yan, Principal Taiwan Journalism and Information Academy Malaysia, and the former head Department of Government and Public Administration, the Chinese University of Hong Kong, to deliver a speech. Mr. Chang, please.
Good morning. 不好意思啊，我走后门。Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your coming and also be patient to listen to my talk. My topic is the Communist Party of China and one nation, two systems of Hong Kong. First of all, I forgot to take. First of all, I want to point out one nation and two systems and the major perspective. Because, the Communist Party of China have decided to give Hong Kong one nation, two systems. End up there have three major perspectives of the world. And we know that in the past few hundred years, especially the conflict of sovereignty, national sovereignty, become the major dangers of the world, especially the First World War and the Second World War. Like Japan, invest China, simply want to take China, whole thing of China, and land and resource and the people. Of course, then the Western power went all over the world to secure their colony, all because of sovereignty. They want to expand their sovereignty all over the world. So that means sovereignty as an issue is a very dangerous one. Okay, but now the Communist Party of China knew that very well. If China want to take back Hong Kong right after 1997, or even before, then the people who live in Hong Kong will be facing a terrible situation to adjust. Especially, I have gone through the end of the colony of Malaysia and end of the colony of Singapore. In Malaysia, I grew up in a confined, so-called strategic hamlet. 24 hours within 12 hours, more than 12 hours curfew. And the war against the Communist Party of Malaya and the British. Not only that, the change of the sovereignty back to the local Malaysia become a major danger for all the people, especially the money. Overnight, the money can be useless. So in Singapore also have many problems. In Hong Kong, I was the first one who published a book, The Return of Sovereignty and the Future of Hong Kong. The book was published in 1982. I predict that in Hong Kong, the sovereignty back to China can happen a clash between US, UK and China. But end up Deng Xiaoping very openly told Thatcher, who met her in Beijing the first time, he said we can talk about the returning of the sovereignty peacefully through the diplomatic talk. And if you don't agree to go through the negotiation in the diplomatic talk, then there's no other way out. There will be another war after the Opium War. Of course, he said if you agree to talk about the returning of Hong Kong sovereignty, from now on, we can talk about it. So end up 15 years of bargaining. And China, of course, already put out the platform on the table. He said, after returning of Hong Kong, the UK have nothing to say about it. None of your business. I will promise whatever I can. Then end up one nation, two systems. So the sovereignty returning back to China without fighting a bullet. That is amazing. Throughout all over the world, no any colony happened as such. The sovereignty, most important thing, China have allowed Hong Kong to remain a British system. That means what? You know the definition of sovereignty is a nation who have enjoyed the absolute power to enact law to govern their people and the land, and also to establish the government. The law which passed in the country have the absolute status. No any other nation law can overrule the national sovereignty of the country. So under this definition, Hong Kong is given the British system and the legal system. Whole thing remain the same. Only China say that there are two things that enacted in a mini constitution, article number 19, said only diplomacy and also military, national security will be the national affair. That it absolute. Hong Kong have no any status to overrule the country. Okay, so I want to make it clear here. Hong Kong is given the status enjoying over 90% of the sovereignty of herself. China system and the China law have never applied it to Hong Kong. So that is very unusual. This is the first point. And the second point about the ideological conflicts. Ideological conflicts is also the major problem, especially after the Second World War. You know the Cold War have fought between Russia and USA mainly. The so-called Cold War, actually, they have over 460, we call it proxy war. Proxy war. The proxy war means what? Some country have fought for the American interest. So that means that Western capitalism ideology. But the other one is fought for the communism between Russia and USA. Estimated, the proxy war is terrible, it's very fearful. You know, one of the example of proxy war, Vietnam War. Vietnam War has been fought for more than 15 years. You know, the total tonnage of the gunpowder is exceeded the First World War and the Second World War add together. You know? So you mean the war, the bomb and shooting has exceeded First World War and Second World War joined together. So you can see Vietnam War is a very unusual in the world history. But of course, China know that, you know, no any people of any country would like to see this kind of the ideological war. China never wanted. From very beginning, China is offended by the Communist Party, the communism of China is offended by the capitalism of the Western power. China always wants to remain a peaceful relationship with them, but they can hardly accept and hardly listen. So that is the thing, the point we can see that. But China, when it gets back Hong Kong, you see that when very important, Deng Xiaoping have been approached a question that, how about the Communist Party will come to rule Hong Kong? No. Totally no Communist Party of Hong Kong, no Communist Party in Hong Kong. So you can see, even Communist Party under the central leadership have totally allowed Hong Kong to be their own, ideologically speaking, capitalism. So this is another point, another very major world issue that never happened to any Western powers in the history. So China has making Hong Kong a good example to demonstrate that ideological conflict can be avoided. Ideological value can accommodate each other. Not necessarily, not definitely a war between them. So the second point, the third perspective I want to emphasize about Hong Kong, one nation, two systems. You know, there are many, we call it metropolitan of the world. The most famous one, I will say that, I will point out London, metropolitan, New York. But I've stayed in New York before when I studied there. I also have gone to London. You know, when you go to New York, you go to the immigration officer, they will ask you a lot of questions, even ask you how much money you carry. When you show them the American dollar at one time, how can you have American dollars? Well, I don't know how to answer the question. I said, sir, how can I have the American dollar? American dollar is all over the world. You know, that kind of a question is given by the immigration officer. So you can see that the attitude of the metropolitan have treated the foreign visitor very fearfully, not comfortably. So I will say, Hong Kong, I stay in Hong Kong more than 45 years, my dear. That's the only place I live in after I was born, to live in a country, longest one. Even Malaysia, I lived total only 22 years. Singapore, 8 years. But in Hong Kong, I lived 45 years. But you know, Hong Kong, after returning back after 1997, Hong Kong became the true world metropolitan. Hong Kong belongs to the world. You know, you read the constitution, mini constitution, Article 24, you know, the definition of Hong Kong PR, including everybody who stay in Hong Kong legally, work after 7 years, who gain the permanent resident, all the permanent residents become the Hong Kong resident. Okay, now, Hong Kong resident enjoy even political right. You know the political right mean what? Election. You can be elected, you can be elected. So okay, you can see there is none of the metropolitan so-called open society, free society, democratic society, American New York, and British London, never open to the world. But Hong Kong open totally. You know that 1997, before 1997, Hong Kong was a colony. The British never have given the political right to Hong Kong people until the last minute, you know, so-called democratized Hong Kong. But China, after China took back Hong Kong, you know, slowly, steadily open up. Of course, recently, because of the riot, so a little bit try to reform. But still, as a international and open, democratic, very free metropolitan, Hong Kong have never changed. Have never changed. So I can see, because of these 3 points, I want to emphasize the Communist Party of China divided in one nation, two systems. It's a very, very major history of the world, and especially positive force of the world. So we should, you know, China said that you want to talk about the story of the Communist Party of China. Hong Kong is a good story to tell about how the Communist Party of China will become very open-ended. We call it win-win, not zero-sum game. Win-win. Okay, your interest is also my interest. Not because your interest is my interest is my interest. No, win-win situation. Under this circumstance, Hong Kong can demonstrate that. After another 100 years, China definitely will venture to the world, try to downgrade the negative sides of the sovereignty, ideology, and also a common living place of the world, or for all people, never discriminate against anybody. Okay, I'm sorry, I used up too much time now. Thank you.
非常感谢郑先生的发言 ，Thank you very much, Mr. Chen。那么今天的研讨会，我们还有幸请到了日本前首相鸠山由纪夫先生。下面我们将看大屏幕来看鸠山由纪夫先生的视频发言。We're honored to have Mr. Hatoyama Yukio, former Prime Minister of Japan, to join us today through a video. 请看大屏幕 ，Please take a look.
皆さんこんにちは。鳩山由紀夫でございます。まずは本年7月に中国共産党が創立100周年を迎えられますことに対し、習近平総書記閣下をはじめ多くの関係各位に対して心からお祝いを申し上げたいと思います。中国共産党が設立されて以来、3つの大きな事件がございました。第1は万里の長征、第2は新中国の建国、第3は改革開放でございます。その中で私なりに過去1世紀を振り返ってみると、我が国による不幸な侵略を含め、中国は多くの困難に直面したにもかかわりませず、その度に中国共産党は人民と共に困難を克服してこられ、
その指導の下で中国は経済発展とともに社会も進歩し、また昨年12月、習近平主席は新時代の貧困緩和目標を達成したと宣言されました。2012年に総書記に就任されて以来、わずか8年間という短期間で1億人近い国民が公式貧困基準を超えたということは、世界史的にも例がないと私は思います。中国共産党がこの歴史に残る大きな役割を果たしてきたことに最大限の敬意を表するとともに、成功の秘訣を一言で申し上げれば、中国共産党が常に中国人民と共にあったためであると私は信じております。また、改革開放以来の中国の長期的な経済発展には目覚ましいものがございまして、第一次世界大戦以降100年の間、経済規模で米国を凌駕した国は存在しませんでしたが、近い将来中国がそうなることはほぼ確実であります。これは中国共産党の成し遂げられた最大の成果の一つと考えられるでしょう。一昨年来、新型コロナウイルスによるパンデミックが世界中を覆い、ワクチン接種が始まったとはいえ、多種の変異ウイルス発生を含め収束の兆しはまだ見えてまいりません。しかしこのような状況下でも中国は徹底した感染対策によって国内の新型コロナウイルスを収束をさせ、経済もプラス成長に転換してまいりました。中国国家統計局の発表によりますと、2020年の中国経済はプラス 2.3% 成長を実現し、コロナ禍が世界中に吹き荒れた中、中国がいち早くこれを収束させ、プラス成長を実現したことは偉大な業績であり、世界経済を下支えする意味でも大きな貢献となったわけでございます。また、中国は早い段階でワクチンの開発に成功し、世界の国々に提供していることは、国内のみならず世界の多くな命を救っているのであると理解をしています。こうした偉大な業績は中国共産党の指導の賜物であり、高く評価されるものだと思っています。今、世界は新型コロナウイルスをはじめ、地球環境、いわゆる気候変動問題、貧困など複数のグローバルな課題に直面しています。第19回全人代の報告書の中に、中国の特色ある外交とは、新しいタイプの国際関係と人類運命共同体構築を促進することだと記載されています。古来、既存の大国と対等する大国との間には緊張がつきものです。今日、中国の GDP はアメリカの約7割に達し、2028年にも逆転するという予測もございます。米中の力の接近が続く以上、国際関係は大変に難しい緊張を伴った時代が続くことでございましょう。だからこそ、習近平主席の唱えられる人類運命共同体の構築が国際社会安定の鍵を握ることになると信じています。この思想は、私が唱えてまいりました友愛精神と東アジア共同体構想に通ずるものでございまして、私自身も強く共感し支持しております。私は2年前に他の国のリーダーたちと共に習近平国家主席と会見させていただいたことがあります。その際に私の唱えております友愛精神は、孔子が論語で説いております仁と助だと思うと、ぜひ友愛精神で一帯一路構想を推進してほしいとお願い申し上げましたところ、習主席は鳩山の言う通りである。私は己の欲せざるところ、人に施すことなかれの助の精神で一帯一路を推進していきたいと答えられました。習主席が私の友愛精神を理解していただき、日本や世界との親しい交流を深めていこうと表明されましたことに心から感動し、このようにして世界と積極的にコミュニケーションを取る中国側の姿勢を高く評価をしております。これから中国共産党が次の100年に入ろうとするときに、特に開放的、包容的なイメージで国際的に どう作り上げて、どう信頼関係を構築していくかはとても重要な点だと思っています。日本の経験に照らし合わせたとき、発展段階が進んでフロントランナーになったときに国家の真価が問われると思います。中国の国力がここまで向上した今、中国は米国のみならず世界各国とどう向き合うかが問われることになるでしょう。私は特にコロナ禍以前の2年間、日中の地方との民間交流を深めるために中国の各方面から訪中を招請され、北京から海南島まで多くの地域を回って行く先々で中国の民間と地方による日中友好があるいは大変素晴らしく進んでいるということを熱い思いを肌で感じてまいりました。この国同士の関係が必ずしもうまくいっているとは言えない中で、日中の間にこうも強固な友好の土台があるからこそ、私は日中関係の未来に自信を持っているのでございます。また、日中は歴史、文化、経済、医療などの面で深いつながりがあり、強力なウィンウィンを目指さない理由はないのであります。谢谢大家。
谢谢。下面有请英国剑桥大学前高级研究员、清华大学访问教授马丁·雅克先生进行视频发言。Now let's welcome Mr. Martin Jack, former senior fellow of Cambridge University and visiting professor of Tsinghua University, to deliver a speech through video. Please.
Well, I'd like to thank the organisers of the conference for giving me this opportunity to speak to you. It's a privilege and I look forward to it. And I'd like to send my greetings to all the attendees and wish you a successful conference. The West does not understand China. It doesn't understand China because the West's self-belief is that every country should be like the West. The same norms, the same values, the same kind of institutions. But it's quite impossible for China to be like the West. Why? Because China comes from very different history and a very different culture. And it is these two things that shape China today and, of course, over a long period of time. Now, let me give you a classic example of the West's problem in this context. You will remember that between 1972 and 2016, there was a relatively cooperative and benign period in the relationship between China and the United States. And for the Americans, this was based on two basic assumptions. The first was that over time, as China modernized, it would westernize, and thereby it will become increasingly like a Western-style country, maybe economically, but certainly politically. It didn't happen. The reason why Trump pulled out of the China agreement, as it were, was because of this extraordinary miscalculation on the part of the United States, which was a product of Western hubris and Western arrogance. Because what happened was, by Jove, China certainly modernized successfully, reaching a level which challenged the position of the United States in the world economically. And at the same time, it certainly didn't become like a Western-style democracy. China's political system remained as distinctive as it had been at the beginning and as distinctive as it has been historically over a very long period of time. And here we have the crunch. China will remain highly distinctive from the West in all sorts of different ways, because China is rooted in Chinese civilization. It is a civilization state as well as a nation state, but primarily a civilization state. It is shaped today, as well as historically, by Confucian values. The relationship between the state and society is very different from that which prevails in the West. And of course, meritocracy is a fundamental aspect of Chinese governance. Now, nowhere is this chasm, if you like, between China and the West more evident than in their respective political systems. Let me talk about the West's attitude for the moment. The West thinks that, or the West's main calling card, put it like this, main calling card since 1945 has been democracy, by which it means universal suffrage, multi-party system, rule of law. And in its view, any political system that does not have these characteristics lacks a fundamental legitimacy. In other words, that in its view, China's political system lacked popular legitimacy. The West believes that this is the summit of achievement when it comes to governance. It cannot be improved upon. It is, if you like, here to stay forever. Now, a bit of history here will help us to get this into context, because we need to get it into context. We're talking about since 1945. Between 1918 and 1939, most of what we know as the West was not democratic. Britain, yeah, in that period, conformed to this. The United States, by and large, conformed to this. But by and large, across Europe, for example, most countries were not democratic in this form. Indeed, many were authoritarian regimes. So it's very important to get this into context, you see. Because if we want to understand what's happened since the 1945, we don't want to deal in abstract ideals. We want to understand the circumstances that underpinned the West's ability and commitment to this kind of democracy. This period was marked by Western hegemony, Western leadership of the world, Western economic supremacy in the world, reasonable economic growth, and of course, rising living standards. These all pertained in the West, certainly from 1945 to around about 1980. Then from 1980, things began to weaken, to fall apart a little, if you like. Because, you know, since 1980, half the American population has had either stagnant or falling living standards. And the financial crisis in 2008 accelerated the growing economic problems in the West. Growing dissatisfaction, which had political implications, political consequences. It is impossible to understand the election of Trump in 2016 without understanding the deep dissatisfaction amongst wide sections of the American population in the American system, its failure to deliver, the failure of the democratic system to deliver, not just the economy. Now, we saw this reach extraordinary proportions just before the presidential election, January the 6th. Insurrection, Capitol Hill, Washington, D.C. the citadel of democracy, as it were, in the American way of thinking. And we saw increasingly, well, maybe does Trump actually support American-style democracy? Is he an advocate of it? Well, there wasn't much evidence to suggest this. He was clearly, at best, a profound skeptic. So what we are witnessing in the West is a crisis of democracy, a growing crisis of democracy, certainly in the United States. Biden's in power now. Will Trump get elected next time, or will someone like Trump get elected next time? We are witnessing in the West a crisis of governance. Now, the West likes to talk about some kind of crisis of Chinese governance. I'll come to that in a moment. This is obviously, quite frankly, nonsense. In fact, what the task the West has to address is this. They don't understand the Chinese Communist Party. And they need to understand the Chinese Communist Party, because the Chinese Communist Party is undoubtedly the most formidable political party in the world. It is the most successful political party of modern times. It has transformed China since 1949 from an extremely poor country to what is now the second largest economy in the world, and increasingly it's on the verge of becoming the largest economy in the world. This is a remarkable achievement. And you might ask the question, well, how has the Chinese Communist Party succeeded in doing this? This is an extremely important question. I think that first, it's, as I've already alluded to, it's got extremely deep roots in the Chinese population. And that's given it a sense of the need to represent, of representativity, and also an underlying self-confidence that you do actually represent the people and therefore can act and speak on their behalf. That's one factor. I think the other factor I would emphasize is that the Chinese Communist Party is intellectually remarkably agile, resourceful. It has a sense of direction, or an ability to conceive of a strategy and follow that strategy through. There's another characteristic I think that's worth emphasizing about the Chinese Communist Party, and that is it combines two things which on the face of it are dichotomous. One is it thinks long term. It's very far-sighted. It is always thinking about the future. It's always conceiving of what the future, what China's future should be like, on the one hand. And on the other hand, it's very pragmatic. Remember the old slogan, very popular with Mao, but also many Chinese leaders, Deng and Xi Jinping and so on. Seek truth from facts. In other words, don't build castles in the air. Always make sure that you're addressing the reality as it is. So you have these two very powerful steers, if you like. One is long-term thinking. The other is being pragmatic, always keeping in touch with the situation and where the people are. Now, what's another very important characteristic, it seems to me, of China and Chinese governance? And here we reach back actually into Chinese history. You know, one of the features of Western discussion of the state of governance is that by and large, it only talks about the means of selection. In other words, about how they conceive of Western style democracy. The points I made earlier, universal suffrage, multi-party system, and so on. The West does not, or barely ever actually in reality, talk about state competence, government competence. Now, when you take China, China is entirely different. And this goes back a very long time. In fact, in some sense, it takes us actually back to Confucius. China has always prided itself on its statecraft, on its governing competence. This has always been regarded by the Chinese as absolutely fundamental. That the state is it contains and is composed of the best people, and it is able to act in a highly competent way. And I would underline this point and this difference, because in reality, although China's still, a developing country and come very quickly from poverty and so on, and has never had these kind of resources before, but actually state competence, the competence of those who run the state, is much higher than it is in the West. And if you want to understand how China has got to where it is now, then this is one of the very most important reasons. Now, one of the criticisms of China in the West is that it is that it's a one-party system, and in a one-party system, the people don't have any choice, and therefore it's subject to a process of ossification. Well, first of all, it would be difficult to claim that the Chinese governance, the Chinese system, or China itself has ossified in the period since 1949. I mean, this is a country which, figuratively speaking, has been changing at the speed of light and has managed somehow or other, with an extraordinary way, to keep pace with the way in which the society and the economy has changed, and remain in the leadership of that process. So what about choice? Well, let's not talk in cliches here. Let's take the end of Mao, after the death of Mao, and Deng Xiaoping becoming China's leader. And what did Deng Xiaoping represent? I mean, he believed that China was changing, was growing, but could grow faster. He believed that China could do much better. So what did he do? He made two fundamental changes to the way in which the Chinese Communist Party thought. First of all, he expanded the notion of economic strategy to embrace not just the government or the state and the plan, but also the market. This was a big change, but it was an absolutely critical change, because from that moment, China, instead of growing at around 4 to 5%, started growing at 10%. And secondly, he believed that China needed to join the world, to integrate itself with the world, including the capitalist world. He was very confident. Ultimately, we have to be able to compete with the capitalist world. In other words, he was behind the integration of China into the world. Now, these were actually two profound changes, bigger changes than any major Western countries made in that same period between 1978 and the present. Extraordinary changes. And where did they come from? Another political party? No, it came from the Chinese Communist Party. How does the Chinese Communist Party manage to do something like that? Because this is a Communist Party deeply rooted amongst the people, very self-confident, and therefore able to make changes which, quite frankly, in a Western country like the Democrats and the Republicans, or the Conservative Party and the Labour Party, we've never seen anything like that. So the idea that just because you've got a one-party state, you ossify, you can't make shifts, you can't make changes, you lose touch with the people, I'm sorry. That might be happening in the West, but it's certainly not been happening in China. And by the way, the other thing, of course, that Deng made was he introduced, he said, look, we need a new kind of state. We need a state that is competent to engage in economic transformation. We need We need a new mentality. We need everyone to possess this idea of where we need to go. We need everyone to have initiative and so on. And Deng, I think, was in a sense, he in that sense invented the modern Chinese innovative spirit that we see now so well. So what else can we say about it? Well, one of the things that always strikes me and impresses me about the Chinese Communist Party is that it doesn't think that despite all these successes, despite this extraordinary history, it doesn't believe that it is a model for others. It doesn't expect, it doesn't require, it doesn't believe that other countries can transplant the Chinese way into their own country, because China is specific. China is very different. Now, contrast that, by the way, with the attitude of the United States, as I started at the beginning. Everyone should be like us. Everyone should have a Western template. Or contrast it indeed with the Soviet Communist Party, which believed, you know, in every country being like the Soviet Union. China's mentality is very different. Sure, it's got things to offer. It's got things that other countries can learn from, especially the developing world, but also increasingly the developed world. But that's different from requiring other countries to copy you. And I think that's very important. China, in that sense, understands historically and in the contemporary context the fundamental importance of pluralism, of plurality, of diversity in the world. And that is what informs, in my view, this approach. So what can we say? Well, in conclusion, I'd make 2 points. First of all, we're celebrating the 100th anniversary of the Chinese Communist Party. Does it seem old? Does it seem as if it's lost its energy? Does it seem as if it's getting stale? I think not. I think actually the Chinese Communist Party is extraordinarily dynamic institution, which has this incorrigible ability to keep moving with the times. And I expect it to do in future. Now, of course, the future will be a huge challenge, because China's future will be as a much more developed and prosperous country, society and economy, and also playing a much more important role in the world. Do I think China will be up to the challenge? Well, of course, China will make many mistakes. It's always making many mistakes. Any leadership that doesn't make mistakes is not a leadership, because it's not doing anything. You have to experiment. You have to find out. You have to work out. You have to move on. You have to learn, not just from your successes. You must learn from your mistakes. And this will be the challenge for the Chinese Communist Party, for example, over the next 50 years. In conclusion, I just want to say this. Let's reflect, to finish, on China's history. Over a period of 2,000 years, since the Qin dynasty, 211 BC, China has uniquely had arguably 5 periods when it has been either the most advanced society in the world or one of the most advanced. I'm thinking of part of the Han, the Tang, maybe the Song, part of the Ming, and part of the Qing. And now China stands on the eve of once more becoming the most developed and most important country in the world. And it will have achieved this under the remarkable leadership of the Chinese Communist Party. Thank you very much.
非常感谢马丁·雅克先生 ，Thank you very much, Mr. Jacques。那么下面有请全国人大常委会香港基本法委员会委员、香港大学法律学院教授陈弘毅先生发言。Now, may I invite Mr. Albert Chen Hongyi, member of the Hong Kong Basic Law Committee of the Standing Committee of the National People's Congress, and Professor, Faculty of Law, the University of Hong Kong, Mr. Chen.
Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, it is an honor for me to speak at this symposium to commemorate the 100th anniversary of the Communist Party of China, or CPC. As a scholar of law, I would like to speak briefly on two law-related projects in the history of the party that are still ongoing today. They are the project of developing a socialist legal system with Chinese characteristics, and the project of one country, two systems. After the PRC was established in 1949, it was decided to abolish the existing legal system of the KMT regime and to build a new socialist legal system. The new legal system was developed on the basis of the CPC's experience of governance of parts of China before 1949, and also by borrowing from the concepts and institutions of socialist legality in the Soviet Union at the time. A firm foundation for the new legal system was laid by the enactment of the first constitution of the PRC in 1954. In that year, the National People's Congress also passed a series of organic laws on the basic institutions of the political and legal systems. In 1956, the 8th National Congress of the CPC decided to embark on a project of legal codification. It was decided that laws would be made to protect citizens' rights, and state organs were required to abide by the law. It is well known that China experienced some setbacks to the project of legal system building after the anti-rightist movement of 1957, and further and more severe setbacks during the Cultural Revolution era that began in 1966. It is also well known that the historic turning point came in December 1978, when the third plenum of the 11th Central Committee of the CPC was held. Adopting the ideas of Deng Xiaoping, the plenum decided not only on a new policy of reform and opening in the economic arena, but also decided that China should actively engage in the project of rebuilding its legal system. Deng Xiaoping said at the time, and I quote, "In order to safeguard people's democracy, the legal system must be strengthened. Democracy needs to be institutionalized and legalized, so that such a system and such laws should not change merely because of a change in leadership or a change in the leader's views and attention," unquote. The communique of the third plenum declared as follows: "There must be laws for people to follow. These laws must be observed. Their enforcement must be strict, and lawbreakers must be dealt with. From now on, legislative work should have an important place on the agenda of the National People's Congress and its Standing Committee. Procuratorial and judicial organs must maintain their independence as appropriate. They must faithfully abide by the laws, serve the people's interests, keep to the facts, guarantee the equality of all people before the people's laws, and permit no one to have the privilege of being above the law," unquote. The plan for the development of the Chinese legal system was immediately put into action in 1979 when the NPC enacted a series of basic laws. Peng Zheng, a senior official in charge of lawmaking, said to the NPC, "People are craving for law. The people of the whole country are eagerly demanding a sound legal system," unquote. Since 1979, the project of building a modern socialist legal system suitable for China's circumstances has continued to be carried out actively, consistently, and speedily. Legal reform has broadened in scope to cover all major areas of modern law. It has also deepened with the development of legal scholarship and education, and increasing understanding of the importance of the legal system for the purposes of economic development, better governance of society, and better protection of citizens' rights and interests. The achievements in building China's legal system has received international recognition. For example, Professor William Alford of Harvard University has described China's legal development since 1979 as an event of epic historic proportions, and has pointed out that no other major modern society has endeavored in so short a time to reconstruct its legal system in so extensive and novel a fashion. Professor Stanley Lopman of Stanford University commented that since 1979, law has gained more importance than it has ever possessed in Chinese history, and new conceptions of legal rights have been developed. The foundation for all major legal developments in the area of reform and opening is the 1982 Constitution, which is the fourth constitution in the history of the PRC. This constitution, subject to some amendments, is still in force today. From the perspective of the rule of law, Article 5 of the Constitution is highly significant. It provides for the supremacy and authority of the Constitution and the law, and requires all state organs and political parties to abide by the Constitution and the laws. The Constitutional Amendment of 1999 introduced a new provision into Article 5, which states the principle of ruling the country according to law and building a socialist state based on the rule of law. The 1999 amendment is one of 5 sets of amendments to the 1982 Constitution. The amendments reflect the deepening and strengthening of the policy of reform and opening, including economic reform as well as legal reform. For example, the constitutional amendments have introduced the following terms and concepts into the Constitution: the preliminary stage of socialism, socialism with Chinese characteristics, the socialist market economy, protecting the private sector of the economy, and protecting human rights and private property rights. At the 15th National Congress of the CPC held in 1997, it was declared that the goal of legal development was to establish a socialist legal system, a socialist system of laws with Chinese characteristics by the year 2010. Since 1997, further intensive efforts in lawmaking have been made, and it was announced at the NPC meeting in 2011 that the task of forming the legal system, this system of laws with Chinese characteristics, had been successfully completed by the target date of 2010. In 2014, the 4th plenum of the 18th Central Committee of the CPC was held. This was the first plenum of the Central Committee in the CPC's history that devoted itself entirely to the topic of legal development. The plenum passed a decision on the full promotion of ruling a country according to law. The decision elaborated the concept of the system of socialist rule of law with Chinese characteristics, which includes the 4 domains of lawmaking, implementation of law, judicial reform, and promotion of compliance with law. Efforts in the implementation of the 2014 decision and further development of legal thought led to the promotion of Xi Jinping's thought on rule of law early this year. At the same time, a plan for development of rule of law in China in the period 2020 to 2025 was promulgated. According to this plan, a system of socialist rule of law with Chinese characteristics should be basically formed by the year 2035. By this date, the project of the modernization of China's system of governance and its governance capacity, as enunciated at the 4th plenum of the 19th Central Committee of the CPC in 2019, is also expected to be completed. We can therefore observe that the project of legal development initiated by Deng Xiaoping in 1978 is a long-term project that is still very much a work in progress today. So is the project of One Country, Two Systems initiated by Deng, also in the late 1970s, to which I will now turn. The idea of One Country, Two Systems was originally conceived for the purpose of the peaceful unification of mainland with Taiwan. This was first publicized in the 9-point proposal of Chairman Ye Jianying of the National People's Congress Standing Committee in September 1981. In January 1982, Deng Xiaoping used the term One Country, Two Systems for the first time, and he said that this was the essence of Ye Jianying's proposal. There was to be one China, but two systems, the socialist system on the mainland and the capitalist system in Taiwan. The new constitution enacted in December 1982 contains Article 31, which provides for the possible establishment of special administrative regions in China. The concepts of one country, two systems and special administrative regions were soon applied to resolve the question of Hong Kong's future, leading to the conclusion of the Sino-British Joint Declaration in September 1984. In a speech on the 31st of July 1984, Deng has expressed full confidence in one country, two systems. He also said that it can become a model for the international community in resolving problems left over by history. That is, a model for the peaceful settlement of international disputes. When Deng met with Mrs. Margaret Thatcher in Beijing on the 19th of December 1984, he pointed out that the 50-year guarantee for the Hong Kong Special Administrative Region was based on careful consideration of China's realities and developmental needs. He said that by the middle of the 21st century, China would reach the same level of economic development as other developed countries. In the meantime, he believed that allowing capitalism to exist in a relatively small area of China, while the main body of China would continue to practice socialism, is an arrangement which is not only conducive to the maintenance of stability and prosperity in Hong Kong, but can also contribute to economic development and modernization in the mainland. As in the case of China's legal development, the project of One Country, Two Systems is still a work in progress today. It is noteworthy that One Country, Two Systems has been emphasized as one of the 14 national policies to be insisted upon, according to Xi Jinping's thought on socialism with Chinese characteristics in the new age that was endorsed by the 19th National Congress of the CPC in 2017. Xi's vision is that socialist modernization will be realized by the year 2035. And by the year 2050, China would become, and I quote, a modernized and strong socialist state that is wealthy, democratic, highly civilized, harmonious, and beautiful, unquote. I'm sure we in the Hong Kong Special Administrative Region, under One Country, Two Systems, can make an important contribution to this project of socialist modernization and the renaissance of the Chinese nation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chen. 谢谢陈弘毅先生. Please be seated. Thank you. 下面有请英国皇家国际事务研究所主席、高盛前首席经济学家、金砖之父吉姆·奥尼尔先生进行视频发言. Now let's welcome Mr. Jim O'Neill, Chair of the Royal Institute of International Affairs in UK, former Chief Economist of Goldman Sachs, and he's also known as Mr. Brick, B-R-I-C. Let's welcome him to deliver a speech through video, please.
This year is actually the 20th year of when I first created the BRIC acronym. And it's quite a coincidence that it is also the same year as the 100th anniversary of the Chinese Communist Party. 20 years after I first thought of the idea, it is remarkable how much China has come to dominate the aggregates of the BRICS group. Today, at around $15 trillion, China is actually twice the size of all the other BRICS countries put together. And when I look back over the 20 years, it is pretty remarkable that of the four main BRIC countries, China, Brazil, Russia, and India, China is the only one over the whole of those 20 years that has done what my famous BRICS concept suggested each country could do to achieve its potential. And if China, even with slower growth as outlined in the latest long-term planning of the governments, even if China slows to growth around 5% over the coming decade, which I emphasize is consistent with government plans, it will still be, by the end of this decade or early the next one, at least at the same size as the United States. And it is truly a remarkable achievement and has many, many lessons for all sorts of economies and societies all over the rest of the world. And of course, in particular, talking about it as we come out of this troubling pandemic, at least in many Western countries we come out of it, many others, including India and Brazil, are still immersed in the worst of their pandemic. But as we start to think about the post-pandemic world, and in particular, the need to further reduce poverty around the world and to reduce inequality, China has got huge lessons to help other countries to learn from as to the economic and perhaps even societal procedures and policies that one has to follow to achieve these goals. I often say to people here in the United Kingdom when they try to understand China, because it's a very different society than ours in the UK, that China today probably has more than 300 million people, primarily in urban areas, that have the same annual average income as the average of the British citizen. And when you think about it, that means there are 5 times more people in China already that enjoy the same annual income as the average person in Britain. And there is no other large populated emerging nation anything close to that situation around the world. And there are very, very important lessons for India, very important lessons for large parts of Africa, and for countries along the One Belt, One Road, as to how they can try to successfully develop themselves. Many things to do with the role of education, the role of technology, both the creation of new technologies, but just as importantly, the ability to spread the use of those technologies across the whole of a country's citizens. And these things hopefully will be very powerful for China to help set examples for to the rest of the world as we go forward. When I look at the economic cycle in 2021 and 2022 in particular, it is of course the case that China is one of the few G20 member countries that we know for certain without a new crisis, by the end of 2021, its GDP will be bigger than it was at the end of 2019. That might be possible in the United States and some other countries if they maintain the vigorous cyclical recovery that's taking place. But we also know for many countries, again my own included, the United Kingdom, it almost definitely won't happen. And we'll have to wait for 2022 for that to be the case. And the way that China has managed to deal with this, and in particular, the fact it's done so without having to undertake a massive fiscal policy stimulus, as it did in 2008, itself is quite a remarkable achievement. And then when one thinks about the longer term consequences about the costs of bringing our societies away from the pandemic, China is probably in a much better position in terms of its government fiscal accounts than many, many other Western economies. And it's going to be really important to see how all of that plays out. As was pointed out to me ahead of doing this interview, I had the pleasure of being a participant in the hugely important BOA Economic Forum in 2015 in Hainan. The first time I ever had the pleasure of going to that beautiful island, and it was a great experience. And it also happened to be the first time where President Xi unveiled his bold, exciting plans for One Belt, One Road. And I hope as we turn away from the pandemic and we try to move to a more unified world of coordinated thinking and policy making, there will be better ways of China trying to share with other countries about how to progress One Belt, One Road, or OBR as it's become known, for the benefit of China and many, many other countries, whether they are directly geographically located on that road or those more distant. Because if we all get this right, the win-win benefits in terms of global trade for everybody will be spectacular. So congratulations to everybody for organizing this event. One of these days I look forward post-pandemic of being able to travel to Hong Kong and to mainland China again. But in the meantime, let me wish you all the best for a very good event, and thank you.
谢谢阿尼尔先生 ，Thank you very much, Mr. O'Neill. And 下面有请新加坡国立大学东亚研究所前所长、香港中文大学深圳人文社科学院代行院长郑永年先生视频发言。Next, may I invite Mr. Zheng Yongnian, former chairman, East Asian Institute, National University of Singapore, acting dean, the School of Humanities and Social Science, the Chinese University of Hong Kong, Shenzhen, to deliver a speech via video.
Thank you. First of all, I would like to thank the organizer for inviting me to join this very important, very meaningful conference. Simply because it's a 100th anniversary of the Chinese Communist Party. I think it's a very important event, not only for China, but also for the whole world. And but today I would like to look into this issue, talk about the Chinese Communist Party from a scholarly view, because I myself have been conducting research on the Chinese Communist Party for the years. So I would like to make, because of a time constraint, I would like to make a few points. I would say, the Chinese Communist Party has the following very important, I believe, very important characteristics. First of all, the Chinese Communist Party is a missionary party. The party has its mission. Of course, the party adjusts its mission according to time, according to the needs, right? During Mao Zedong's time, the party's mission was revolution, to engage in revolution, to build a new China. In Deng Xiaoping's time, the party's mission was to develop Chinese economy. As I mentioned, Deng Xiaoping mentioned, poverty is not socialism. So the party focused very much on economic development. Right? The missions. Now, since the 18th Party Congress, well, Xi Jinping had a new mission for the Chinese Communist Party. Right? Not just the economic development. We need to let the majority of people to get rich. Right? So the party also has a tool to carry out its mission. So compared to other political party, I don't see other political party, have a kind of 5-year plan, 10-year plan. But the Chinese Communist Party has. It has a 5-year plan. Even the last party congress, the party congress a few years ago, the party has a plan, toward the 2050s. So the party divided the next stages of China development into 3, to 2020, to 2035, to 2050. Of course, those are about China's modernization. Well, if you're interested, you can look into detail, very interesting, right? But why is the party is missionary? Because it's about, the legitimacy of a Chinese Communist Party. In the West, the legitimacy of a political party is a calculation of votes, right? Because one vote system. But the Chinese Communist Party functions in a different way. The party rules the country, gain its legitimacy by deliver its mission. What's the mission? The mission is the Chinese Communist Party's promise to its people, right? The party promises it to people, then it delivers its a promise. So that's why the party has consistently addressed its development goal. When a new stage comes, the party has a new goal, but those goals are not an abstract philosophy, abstract idea about the party. No, those mission was formed according to people's needs, according to society's needs. So that's a mission. You actually, put it simply, is a people's need, right? And Xi Jinping has repeatedly emphasized that the party has to work for the people, right? Secondly, the party is an open organization. It's an open party. Well, the West always say, well, you have one party dictatorship, right? But one party, you cannot equate one party to dictatorship. Dictatorship is a dictatorship and don't share power with others. Actually, the Chinese party, yes, it's one party, but the party is open. First of all, at least in two senses, in two levels. First of all, the party recruits elites from all social walks. Well, it's a party of China's meritocracy. China has a meritocracy tradition for more than 2,000 years. I think the party has inherited this tradition. So you look into the party members, in party cadres, even political bureau members, even standing committee of political bureau members. No, those members are from different corners of society. China doesn't have political families like those in the United States, those in Europe, those in Japan. Well, the Chinese Communist Party is a mass party. It's a people's party. So if you have a wonderful, performance in different professions, different corners of society, then the party will recruit you. So like what Chairman Mao Zedong once said, our cadres are from Wuhu Sihai, right? From different seas, different mountains, then from different social groups. The party is open for the whole society. At the second level, the party is accommodative to all social interests, economic interests. With the rapid development of Chinese development, Chinese society, just like all society, United States or European society, is become very, very pluralistic, right? The Chinese society today is categorized with pluralism. No big difference from that of the United States, from this of European countries, right? So in the West, what you do, if you have a different political interest or economic interest, you organize different political parties. If you don't like conservatives, you can join Democrat. If you don't like Democrats, you can choose conservative. If you don't like both, in principle, in theory, you can organize your own party, a political party. But in reality, of course, it's not. There's no space for a third party to exist in the United States. But in China, not. China, of course, in China, you're not to allow to establish your own party. But you have freedom to join the party. All the kind of social economic interests can join the party. The party is accommodative. So China have this so-called what we call 政治协商 political consultancy system. You join the party, they join the party. You found a way to express your interest, to articulate your interest, to let the party's policy to reflect your interest, your view, right? So I call the West system as an external pluralism, right? You can do whatever you want. While Chinese system is internal pluralism. Yeah, we only have one political party, but it's open. You can choose. You can solve the problem within the party, not outside the party, right? So the party is very open. Otherwise, you are not going to explain, what's happening in China. Like according to China institution, we have a mixed economy, mixed ownership, right? So you have to ask yourself, why is this mixed ownership system can exist in China without the party's accommodative approach, right, to different kind of social economic interests. Thirdly, the Chinese Communist Party is a party which emphasizes greatly on political participation. Political participation is important. Political participation, I believe, is the most important part of democracy, right? Well, in the West, the people understand democracy only in the sense, well, you can vote. But I think political participation can have different forms. In China, the most important participation, political participation, is policy participation. Well, our Western friends always say China is a dictatorship. But if China was a dictatorship, then China everything was decided by Xi Jinping. But if looking into facts, Chinese policy, important policies, all important policies are subject to debate. Not only political debate among party members, but also among the social groups, among scholars, right? Now, last year, China passed the civil code, very important law. Well, this is civil code, this law, how many years? I remember like 7 or 8 years discussion, debate, right? A lot of revisions. Most important, very important policies in China, they have to go through, many rounds of debate, discussion, The party has to take a different kind of consideration, different kind of interest, Well, that's very important. If you compare China policy decision process and that of the United States, you will find the United States system is more centralized. For example, the US just passed the 2021 competition law, right? Aiming at China. And it only took a few months for such an important law. So Congressman said yes. I don't think the US people has a lot to say in this law. US commercial group have a lot to say in that law. So we have to look into China reality. I don't think, policy, if we look into details of decision-making policy, it's really the US system is much more centralized than China's system, right? And I think, firstly, the Chinese Communist Party is a party which has a strong willing to reform itself, to engage self-revolution, what China calls 自我革命. That's important. if the party in the West, a party can hardly reform itself, right? The party's purpose is to reform as a party, but not itself. In China, it has been a slogan, also has been a common practice to reform yourself. If you are not able to reform yourself, then you will be reformed. No? If you are to be reformed, then there will be revolution, right? So the party, for example, has since Mao Zedong, every leadership will initiate, for example, anti-corruption campaign to tighten party discipline, right? Particularly since the 18th Party Congress, after Xi Jinping came to power, the Chinese Communist Party initiated a lasting anti-corruption campaign until today, right? What's the purpose, right? What's the purpose? No, to establish a clean government. A clean government is very important for all government, not just China. Even many countries with democracy, or many democracies, corruption, even until today, is very serious, right? So I think that's the party is to engage a self-revolution is not so easy, not easy. I have been observed so many political parties. Most parties are very selfish. They only want to reform others, not themselves. But the Chinese Communist Party is opposite. It's only ruling party, so it has to reform itself. So in a way, I think the party has been successful, but we don't have enough study on the Chinese Communist Party. So I hope our scholarly committee can really spend more time to look into the Chinese Communist Party. The 19th Communist Party Congress mentioned a one notion, a new concept. I mean, China's alternative, 中国方案. China is trying to provide the alternative. Well, China is not anti-West, but China can provide an alternative to the West model, right? Of course, like President Xi Jinping mentioned, China will not export its own model to the world, but other countries can learn from China's experience to achieve both development and independence. Because that's I think this notion, 中国方案 notion, is very serious. China has the Chinese Communist Party has a rich experience in that regard. I think that experience is relevant not only to China's future, but also to many developing countries, right? So I would say, the party really matters not only from China, but for the whole world. Thank you.
谢谢郑永年先生。下面有请香港资深大律师、香港大学名誉法律教授、香港特区政府前刑事检控专员江乐士先生发言。Now may we please invite Mr. Ian Granville Cross, Senior Counsel, Honorary Professor of Law at University of Hong Kong and former Director of Public Prosecutions of Hong Kong. Mr. Cross, please.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'm honoured to have been invited to speak on this historic occasion, and I thank the organisers for allowing me to share my thoughts on recent legal developments in China. Since 1921, the country has obviously undergone profound change, in consequence of which an ancient civilization is now fully realising its potential. The reform and opening up policy of the late 1970s has helped to shape the country's destiny, and it has now achieved domestic renewal, economic strength and global influence, all of which are benefiting its people and also the wider world. This, moreover, has been achieved through China's own efforts, which have turned its vision into reality. As part of their modernization program, the central authorities, in their request for a better future for the people of China, have studied alternative methods and experimented with different models. This is strikingly illustrated in the Hong Kong and Macau special administrative regions, both of which, after unification, have retained their own distinctive features from which lessons have been learned. These include their long-established legal arrangements, with one following the common law model and the other the civil law tradition. In the late 1980s, the paramount leader, Deng Xiaoping, famously declared that we must build a modern legal system for China. And since then, reformers have taken him at his word by seeking to improve the country's legal arrangements. Although some highly significant reforms have been implemented, they are either being ignored or downplayed in the West because they interfere with the negative notions that some countries like to project of modern China, but they are nonetheless very real. Major progress has been made, including judiciary reform, and this has helped to equip China for its worldwide responsibilities on the One Belt, One Road initiative and beyond. The Chinese courts, for example, resolved approximately 15,000 foreign-related civil disputes in the period 2013 to 2017, with BRI-related cases being a major component. In their adjudications, the courts have, as justice requires, adopted equal protection of litigants as a guiding principle, irrespective of where they come from. And in modernizing itself, China has acknowledged that economic development must be underpinned by a fair and efficient legal system, which is exactly what businesses require. In 2020, the foreign investment law commenced, and this provides new opportunities for foreign investors who, before committing themselves, look for financial certainty and a level playing field, and this is now being provided. In recent times, the emphasis has been on creating a favourable legal environment for the country's reform, development and stability, and in practical terms, judges handling foreign-related disputes are required to provide foreigners with every assistance, and this can take various forms. For example, at the Tongjiao District People's Court in Beijing, a special reception facility has been arranged for foreign litigants. English-speaking judges are available to explain court procedures to litigants, and there is even a special channel for financial institutions, corporations and individual foreign litigants to file their cases. Judges handling foreign-related disputes are also required to expedite the cases and to ensure litigants have access to convenient legal services. Quite clearly, ladies and gentlemen, initiatives of this type will encourage more people, including foreigners, to invest and will also enhance the judiciary's global credibility. Allied to this, arbitration also has a vital role to play in dispute resolution as China optimizes its business environment. There are, therefore, now 260 arbitration commissions with 60,000 staff, and they have handled 4 million arbitration cases involving 70 countries and regions. In 2019 alone, the arbitration commissions handled almost 487,000 international arbitration cases involving 759 billion yuan. At the same time, and in order to foster a better legal environment, the improvement of judicial services is also being prioritised, and this involves greater transparency. In March, the Supreme People's Court work report indicated that changes are being implemented to streamline court procedures and enhance judicial credibility. And this could pave the way for the world's first legal system integrated with artificial intelligence. The judiciary's operations are being transformed by technological initiatives, including the use of artificial intelligence and big data analytics. In this process, the Smart Court initiative is coming into its own, and this involves high-tech measures such as facilitating the filing of documents by court users, releasing court judgments online, algorithm analytics, and AI-assisted decision-making in courtrooms by working with technology companies. Indeed, the progress being made by the courts is actually mind-boggling and far surpasses the expectations of even just a few years ago. The Supreme People's Court work report reveals that since 2014, The courts throughout the country have published over 120 million judgments in China Judgments Online, a data bank, and that over 11 million trials have been broadcast online. This is significant as the publicization of judgments from different parts of the country widens the knowledge of judges and legal professionals about what is happening elsewhere, and this promotes greater consistency among the courts, which results in fairer judging. It also means that judicial credibility is improved, and this enhances public trust in the courts. And indeed, following its launch in 2014, China Judgments Online now includes criminal, civil, and administrative cases, and its search function enables users to track judgments of interest. By March this year, the database, which hosts more than 117 million judgments, the majority of which are criminal cases, had been visited over 5.8 billion times. About 50,000 new judgments are being added daily, with the majority being uploaded by the lower level courts. Apart from the judges, the lawyers can also access the data bank, and this helps them to formulate their submissions. For although China does not follow the case precedent system of the common law world, it nonetheless assists lawyers who are preparing their submissions if they can show the courts how similar cases have been handled by other judges previously, as they can then seek a uniform approach to the same questions. Quite clearly, if national laws are not being applied uniformly throughout the country, then uncertainties will arise, and the new technology is helping to ensure that there are not wide variations of interpretation among the courts in different cities and provinces. The courts, moreover, are now experimenting with admitting evidence electronically, and over an 11-month period in 2020, over 7 million cases were filed online, with more than 4 million cases actually mediated online. In the same period, almost 900,000 trials were heard virtually, which was a 7-fold increase over 2019. And a major benefit of this has been that even during the COVID-19 pandemic, the courts were able to continue their operations. And under China's 14th five-year plan, the country's courts will upgrade to the 4th generation of Smart Court by 2025, which will include not only a centralized database platform for all judicial data, but also a centralized central hub that oversees the implementation of the Smart Court initiative throughout the whole of the country. If, however, the courts are to function effectively and deliver justice, they must be staffed by people of the highest quality, and here there have been significant advances. Until quite recently, there was only limited legal training for judges at the lower levels, but this has now changed. Anyone who aspires to be a judge, or indeed a prosecutor or a lawyer, must, having obtained a law degree, pass the National Unified Legal Professional Examination, which is not easy, as well as a separate judge's examination, and this has raised judicial standards enormously. Many of the new generation of judges have also studied elsewhere, including in Hong Kong, and this has undoubtedly broadened their horizons and enhanced their credibility. And in my own area, which is criminal justice, the Supreme People's Court has, since 2018, prioritised two vital principles in criminal cases. These require, firstly, that there should be no punishment where doubt exists, and secondly, that illegally obtained evidence should not be used against a criminal suspect at trial. These principles are deeply embedded in the common law tradition followed in Hong Kong, and they reflect the notion that the conviction of a suspect is not an end in itself, and that the processes resulting in a conviction must also be fair. Whereas previously the emphasis in criminal trials was upon ascertaining if a confession was true, the emphasis is now upon whether it was voluntary. After the revised criminal procedure law was enacted in 2013, coerced confessions are no longer admissible in evidence against a suspect, even if true. In other words, illegally obtained evidence must be excluded, which reflects global fair trial guarantees. If, however, the judges are to exclude involuntary confessions, they need to know how they came into existence. And this is why the law enforcement agencies are now required to video record the confession-taking process, certainly in the more serious cases. This technique was pioneered here in Hong Kong by the Independent Commission Against Corruption, and it resulted in many more pleas of guilty and fewer acquittals. Given its success, it was then adopted by the Hong Kong police force as well as by law enforcers in Macau. And the principle of legality, which is now accepted, requires that nobody is required to incriminate themselves, and before the courts can accept confessional evidence, prosecutors must first be able to demonstrate, whether by video records or otherwise, that it was made voluntarily. And another fascinating development I would mention is concerns the people's assessors, whose role is not dissimilar to that of jurors in criminal trials in Hong Kong. Although they were originally introduced in the 1950s to give the public a voice in the judicial process, the People's Assessors Law, enacted in 2018, gives them equal rights with judges in trials, unless the law provides otherwise. The object is to achieve judicial democracy, and although they normally sit on 3-person collegiate panels, they are also eligible in graver cases to participate in 7-person panels, usually comprising 3 judges and 4 assessors. Although assessors cannot vote on legal questions, they can still discuss them, but they vote jointly with the judges on factual issues which are decided by the principle of majority rule. And indeed, in 2019, 170,000 people's assessors were appointed, and this has greatly enhanced public participation in the judicial process. I feel sure, therefore, that Deng Xiaoping would have been elated to see the extent to which China has, as he hoped, set about building a modern legal system. He would, I believe, also have been heartened by the successful implementation of the one country, two systems policy for Hong Kong and Macau, of which he was the architect. Although the policy has been implemented in Macau without difficulty, there have been problems in Hong Kong, which are now being resolved by constitutional means and through the efforts of people of goodwill throughout the country. There were fanatics in Hong Kong, encouraged by hostile forces elsewhere, who were prepared to use the city's unique status, not as a springboard for achieving greater things, but as a means of creating chaos and damaging the country as a whole. But they have now been thwarted. Since 1997, the basic law of the Hong Kong Special Administrative Region, which was enacted, of course, by the National People's Congress in 1990, has ensured that the common law system has not only survived in Hong Kong, but has gone from strength to strength. Both judicial and prosecutorial independence are constitutionally guaranteed, and convictions are only ever possible if prosecutors have established guilt beyond reasonable doubt. The principle of trial by jury is upheld, and judges are chosen on the basis of their judicial and professional qualities, and may, in a remarkable gesture, also be recruited from other common law jurisdictions. The Hong Kong Court of Final Appeal is vested with the power of final adjudication, and there are currently 14 overseas non-permanent judges sitting on it, coming from Australia, Canada, and the United Kingdom. The decision to enable Hong Kong to maintain close links with other common law jurisdictions was clearly prescient, and it has helped to maintain confidence in the legal system. There were, however, people who wanted the one country, two systems policy to fail, as they knew that this would weaken China. Since Hong Kong lacked its own national security laws, they launched their insurgency in 2019, which involved destruction, violence, and terrorist outrages. Opposition forces openly preached Hong Kong independence and self-determination, and they unashamedly align themselves with China's geopolitical rivals, even urging them to enact laws which would damage Hong Kong and the country. Once it became clear that the city's way of life was under real threat, the central authorities had no choice but to intervene. The National Security Law for Hong Kong was therefore enacted by the Standing Committee of the NPC on June the 30th, 2020, but it was done, ladies and gentlemen, in a way that was constitutional, minimalist, and respectful of Hong Kong's legal norms. It was constitutional, firstly, because the NPC was exercising the power conferred upon it by the Constitution itself, and secondly, because the Basic Law, Article 13, provides that the NPC Standing Committee can add additional laws to the Basic Laws Annex 3, if they relate to defence and foreign affairs or other matters outside of Hong Kong's autonomy. And it was minimalist because it only contained the laws for the suppression of the criminal acts which were immediately threatening Hong Kong, namely secession, subversion, terrorism, and collusion with foreign powers. And the city, as the Basic Law Article 23 stipulates, was entrusted to enact the remaining and not so urgently needed national security laws, including those for treason, sedition, and theft of state secrets. And thirdly, it was respectful of legal norms because at the outset of the national security law in Article 4, it is stated that human rights shall be respected and protected in safeguarding national security. And these are specified as including freedom of speech, of the press, of publication, of association, of assembly, of procession, and of demonstration, which are rights that residents already enjoy under the Basic Law, the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, and the International Covenant on Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights. And in criminal justice terms, ladies and gentlemen, the National Security Law in Article 5 provides that, quote, the principle of the rule of law shall be adhered to, end of quote, in the conduct of criminal cases. This is achieved by ensuring that the protections enjoyed by criminal suspects are upheld, that the presumption of innocence is respected, that the right to a fair trial is guaranteed, that prosecutions are based on legal certainty, and that wherever possible, cases are handled in accordance with existing judicial procedures. Although certain judges are designated by the Chief Executive on the advice of the Chief Justice as being suitable to handle cases involving national security, it is for the judiciary itself to decide which judge will handle which case, and the chosen judge enjoys the judicial independence guaranteed by the Basic Law's Article 85. There is, moreover, no restriction on foreign judges handling national security cases, which is remarkable, and it once again highlights China's high regard for Hong Kong's international character and its legal traditions. Now, in conclusion, it is apparent that throughout China, legal reform is now buttressing national development, and that the modernization process is yielding positive results, which bodes well for the future. A successful country must be underpinned by an effective legal system, and law-based governance is now entrenched as a governing principle. The people of China are benefiting from the protections provided by increasingly sophisticated laws and legal institutions, and the rights of parties to litigation, whether civil, commercial or criminal in nature, are being appropriately prioritized. The law must always be used as a means of achieving just outcomes, and this must be a national imperative as China moves forward. Thank you very much.
非常感谢江恩石先生发言。Thank you very much, Mr. Cross. 好的，最后呢，我们有请美国库恩基金会主席、中国改革友谊奖章获得者罗伯特·劳伦斯·库恩先生视频发言。And lastly, may we have Mr. Robert Lawrence Kuhn, Chairman, the Kuhn Foundation, U.S. He's also the recipient of China Reform Friendship Medal, who will deliver a speech through video. Please take a look.
各位来宾朋友们，你们好。因为我的中文不好，我必须说英文。下次也许我会能说中文。I am very pleased to participate in this international symposium on the CPC's 100-year history. I have been coming to China for more than 30 years, telling China's story to the world. And although China has many achievements, none is as powerful as China's eradication of all extreme poverty. I have traveled across China, visiting over 100 cities with my long-term partner, Adam Zhu, for research and interviews, books and essays, television and documentaries. Yet as much as I thought I knew China, I did not appreciate all that is required for poverty alleviation until I visited poor villages, especially remote mountainous villages. I spoke with poor villagers, those who had come out of poverty through micro businesses, those who had relocated to suburban areas, and those who, ill or infirm, needed social security support. But going beyond the great good of poverty alleviation itself, understanding how the leadership of the Communist Party of China, the CPC, the party, enables the poverty alleviation campaign to fulfill its mission gives deep insight into the CPC's governance structure and its organizational capabilities. This is especially important at this time of heightened awareness of China's increasing role in global affairs and the increasing sensitivities to it. Those foreigners who may assume that CPC General Secretary Xi Jinping's primary purpose is political power, economic domination, and military expansion may be surprised to learn that he considers poverty alleviation to be his most important task. For about 8 years now, I've been tracking Xi's relentless pursuit to eradicate all absolute poverty in China by 2020. It's his signature program. China's first national goal, as most people know, was to realize a moderately prosperous society by the end of 2020. And Xi Jinping asserted that China could not be a moderately prosperous society, if any of its citizens continue to live below the line of absolute poverty. It was in November 2013 that President Xi first proposed the concept of targeted or precision poverty alleviation. Targeted means individualized procedures and programs with the policies to support them, including standardized definitions of poverty, identification criteria of poor people, and customized plans and programs to bring each out of poverty. 5 methods deal with different poverty conditions: industry, creating a sustainable micro business; relocating, moving people from remote areas; education and training; ecological compensation for those living in ecologically vulnerable areas; and social security, medical subsidies, and direct payments for those who cannot work. 5 levels of local party secretaries coordinate their roles: provincial, municipal, county, township, village. Third-party evaluations are conducted regularly and randomly to assure honesty and accuracy. I was startled to discover that every poor family in China has its own file, each with its targeted plan. That's millions of poor families with customized plans, each checked monthly, recorded on paper in a book, and digitized for central compilation and analysis. Equally startling, local officials are dispatched to impoverished villages to manage poverty alleviation, sometimes for up to 2 years. I watched a democratic appraisal meeting in a remote village where villagers voted into poverty status, one young man whose father had cancer, and cheered when another man was raised out of poverty. I watched local officials being held accountable, their careers at stake. And for those foreigners who marvel at how China contained the novel coronavirus, COVID-19, with so few cases and deaths compared to other countries, I point out that the common root of China winning the war to contain the contagious coronavirus and China winning the war to eradicate extreme poverty is the CPC's leadership and organizational capacity. This remarkable parallelism is a probative insight into China's party-led governance system. In early February 2020, soon after Wuhan was locked down, I went on the record in the media, international and Chinese, voicing confidence that China would contain the escalating pandemic. I based my confidence not on any prophetic gift, but on China's success in alleviating extreme poverty, which I had been following for years. The structural similarities between anti-pandemic and anti-poverty campaigns are striking. CPC leadership, General Secretary Xi's commitment, CPC mobilization. Let's discuss each. First, the operational leadership of the CPC, not just giving directives and making pronouncements, but implementing programs and operating projects through the CPC organizational structure, the central government and the 5 levels of local government, provincial, municipal, county, township, and village. Second, the commitment of Xi Jinping, the General Secretary of the CPC Central Committee, who sets an example that leaders and officials must follow. Almost everywhere she goes, he stresses poverty alleviation and encourages party officials to visit impoverished areas regularly and interact with poor people directly. She has made the remarkable statement, "I have spent more energy on poverty alleviation than on anything else." I know no other national leader who has made such an assertion. Similarly, during the pandemic, when she visited hospitals and spoke with frontline workers, the whole country got the message. Third, the mobilization capacity of the CPC, commanding the country's resources in personnel and materials. To contain the pandemic, China's mobilization was unprecedented in global health history, locking down Wuhan and neighboring cities, 60 million people or more, house-to-house temperature checks, the CPC's grid management system of social control, postponing the return to work after the Lunar New Year, break of hundreds of millions of travelers, recruiting major companies, state-owned enterprises, and the private sector for support and logistics, assigning sister relationships between strong provinces and hard-hit cities in Hubei province, a strategy long employed in poverty alleviation between eastern and western provinces and cities. Similarly, the success of China's targeted poverty alleviation campaign, bringing about 100 million people out of abject poverty since 2012, included the complete relocation of millions of poor farmers from remote mountainous villages to newly constructed urban and suburban residences. Nowhere else could such mega projects work like they worked in China. And the reason they worked is because the party system works for mega projects. Those who recognize China's unprecedented success in both pandemic control and poverty alleviation must also recognize its causal relationship to China's overall party leadership and a strong command-down party-led government. All political systems have trade-offs. And while achieving national objectives is indeed an advantage of China's party-led system, it is not the only criterion for evaluating systems. This is why continuing reform, opening up, and system improvement are needed. China's readiness to change and improve is a critical part of its governance system. In the poverty alleviation campaign, the government is committed to preventing fraud and corruption. With career stakes high and funding vast, cheating and stealing are no surprise. In 2017, the data is very interesting. Of the 122,100 cases of corruption in China, 48,700, more than 1/3, related to poverty alleviation work. Good for the government in releasing these unflattering statistics. China will not allow falsifying data or misappropriating funds to undermine its poverty alleviation goals. President Xi rightly celebrates the success of China's poverty alleviation campaign, but he is also determined that China reduce relative poverty and close the wealth gap. This must be China's long-term commitment, and he allows no delay in making the transition. It is a historic transition from China's successful targeted poverty alleviation campaign to China's new rural vitalization strategy, which will enhance rural standards of living as part of China's long-range vision to the year 2035. Continuing to improve is the same guiding principle that then Zhejiang Party Secretary Xi Jinping told me personally in 2006. It is fair to say that we have achieved successes, Xi said then in 2006. Nevertheless, we should have a cautious appraisal of our accomplishments. We should never overestimate our accomplishments or indulge ourselves in our achievements, Xi stressed to me. He called for China to aspire to our next higher goal and to appreciate the gap between where we are and where we have to go. He described this, again in 2006, as a persistent and unremitting process. No difference today. As it is for poverty alleviation, so it is for containing epidemics. China says it will improve its system of information collection and feedback, error correction, and decision-making. The government states it will learn lessons from the outbreak, which will enhance its capacity for governance. Self-correction, the party says, is its hallmark. Over the years, I have given thought as to what brought about China's developmental miracle, and I'll ask you to consider 11 principles. There are others and different ways to phrase it, but these are the 11 that I have seen over the years. Number one, a people who work long and hard to improve the lives of their families and the destiny of their country. Two, the prioritization of economic and social development over ideological rigidity. Three, a one-party leadership system, what is called by China the multi-party cooperation and political consultation under the leadership of the CPC. So this one-party leadership system enforces political stability and media control and encourages economic development and social enhancement. Four, a one-party leadership system that is structured in hierarchical administrative levels, as we've seen, provincial, municipal, county, township, and village. Five, a one-party leadership system that prioritizes selection, training, monitoring, inspection of key personnel, inculcating a high degree of administrative and managerial professionalism. Six, a one-party leadership system that solicits and pays attention to expert opinion, whether in the party or not, as exemplified by the increasing social power of the Chinese People's Political Consultative Conference. Seven, a one-party leadership system that solicits and pays attention to public opinion, checking polls in a scientific manner to see what people really think. Eight, the setting of long-term goals, midterm objectives, and short-term policies that are monitored and modified continuously. Policies that need long-term commitment have long-term commitment. Number nine, a way of thinking that experiments and tests before implementing and rolling out, like the original special economic zones and the pilot free trade zones originally in Shanghai, now across the country, such as Hainan province. 10, a one-party leadership system that provides checks and balances via anti-corruption institutions. And finally, number 11, a one-party leadership system that is willing to admit and correct errors. Just as future historians may look upon China's fight against the coronavirus as a turning point in worldwide efforts to contain outbreaks of novel diseases, future historians may recognize China's fight against poverty as a turning point in worldwide efforts to eradicate all extreme poverty. History may well thank China for pioneering how to deal with virulent contagions in a globalized world, just as it may well thank China for showing the way how to bring so many people out of extreme poverty. I extend my best wishes for the success of this important conference on the CPC's 100-year history. 谢谢你们。
谢谢，让我们再次以热烈掌声感谢以上的发言嘉宾，谢谢他们。
Once again, ladies and gentlemen, please give a round of applause to all the excellent keynote speakers.
女士们、先生们，今天上午的会议到此结束，请各位移步到指定的餐厅用餐。下午的会议将从2点钟开始，谢谢大家。
Ladies and gentlemen, our morning session has ended, and guests who will participate in our luncheon, please go to the banquet hall. The panel discussion will start at 2 p.m. Thank you.
Thank you.